At the kitchen counter, my father called me a financial burden, as he had countless times before. Without a word, I opened my briefcase and handed him the stack of household bills I'd been secretly paying for the last 3 years. The air in our modest suburban home felt heavy with years of unspoken truths and quiet resentment. The familiar scent of my father's black coffee mingled with the lingering aroma of last night's takeout, a smell that reminded me of countless mornings filled with lectures about my supposed financial irresponsibility. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My father, Thomas Reed, sat at our worn kitchen counter, his weathered hands wrapped around his favorite chipped mug, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose as he reviewed what he thought was our family's mounting debt. His thinning gray hair was still uncombed, his face creased with the permanent scowl that had become his default expression over the years. My younger sister, Lily, had already left for her early shift at the local hospital where she worked as a nurse, leaving just the two of us in this moment of reckoning. "I don't know how much longer I can keep bailing you out, Alex," he said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of disappointment and judgment. "At 32, you should be contributing more, not draining what little resources we have left." I stood across from him, my coffee untouched, dressed in the crisp button-down shirt and slacks I wore to my job as the financial controller for Horizon Technologies, a position I'd worked my way up to over the past 5 years, a position he knew nothing about. "It's getting ridiculous," he continued, gesturing to the pile of bills in front of him. "The property tax is due next week. The insurance premium just went up again. And these medical bills from your mother's treatments keep coming. Meanwhile, you're living here rent-free, eating food you don't pay for, using utilities you don't contribute to." I listened, my face a practiced mask of neutrality that I'd perfected over years of these one-sided conversations. This was the script we'd been following since my mother's diagnosis 7 years ago. He would complain, I would absorb, and life would continue in this dysfunctional pattern we'd established. But today was different. Today, the script was about to change. I reached into my leather briefcase, a gift I'd bought myself after my last promotion, and pulled out a neatly organized accordion folder. Inside were copies of receipts, bank statements, and payment confirmations dating back 3 years. Each document was carefully labeled, categorized, and highlighted. "What's this supposed to be?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm as I placed the folder in front of him. "Some kind of budget plan you found online? A little late for that, don't you think?" "No, Dad," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "These are the bills I've been paying, all of them, for the last 3 years. The confusion on his face might have been comical in another context, the way his eyebrows knitted together, the slight parting of his lips, the sudden stillness of his hands around the mug. "What are you talking about?" he asked, suspicion immediately replacing confusion. I opened the folder and began laying out the documents one by one across the counter. "The property tax you mentioned? I've been paying it since 2021. Mom's medical bills? Set up an automatic payment plan with the hospital 3 years ago. The mortgage? I've been making those payments too. The insurance, the utilities even. The groceries, it's all been coming from my account." His face changed as he looked at the papers, transforming from disbelief to something unreadable. "This doesn't make any sense," he muttered, picking up a property tax receipt with my name clearly listed as the payer. "It makes perfect sense," I replied. "You've been so busy telling me what a financial burden I am that you never noticed I've been keeping this household afloat since Mom got sick. To understand how we arrived at this kitchen counter confrontation, you need to understand the family dynamic that shaped me and the events that led to this moment of truth. Our story doesn't begin with bills or financial struggles. It begins with expectations, perceptions, and the invisible work that goes unrecognized. Growing up in Maplewood, a middle-class neighborhood in suburban Chicago, I was the oldest of 2 children. My father had worked for the same manufacturing company for 30 years, climbing from the factory floor to middle management through sheer determination and grit. My mother, Elena, had been a high school math teacher, beloved by her students and respected by her colleagues. Together, they had built a stable, if modest, life for our family. From an early age, the narrative about me was established. Lily was the smart one, the Stratus student who brought home perfect report cards and glowing teacher comments. I was labeled the dreamer, the kid with potential who just needed to apply himself. It wasn't that I performed poorly in school. I maintained a solid B average, but I approached learning differently. I was curious, exploring topics that interested me with depth, while merely satisfying requirements for subjects that didn't capture my imagination. This difference in our academic approaches became the foundation for how my father viewed us. Lily was responsible, focused, practical. I was distracted, unreliable, impractical. The first significant crack in my relationship with my father came during my senior year of high school. I had been accepted to several universities, including Northwestern with a partial scholarship. But I was most excited about attending Lakeland College, a smaller school with an exceptional business program that aligned perfectly with my interests. I still remember the day I shared my decision with my parents. We were sitting at the dining table, the acceptance letters spread out in front of us. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe. To our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I've decided on Lakeland, I announced, unable to contain my excitement. Their business analytics program is exactly what I want to study, and they have connections with tech companies in Chicago for internships. My mother smiled warmly. That sounds wonderful, Alex. If that's where you feel you'll thrive, then you should go. But my father's reaction was entirely different. His face darkened as he picked up the Lakeland acceptance letter. Northwestern is offering you money and you want to go to this. It's a place, he said, his tone making it clear what he thought of my choice. Do you have any idea how much we've sacrificed to give you opportunities you want to throw away? A scholarship to Northwestern for some unknown college? Lakeland isn't unknown, Dad, I tried to explain. It's smaller, but their business program has incredible placement rates. They focus on taking your money, he interrupted. This is exactly the kind of impractical decision-making. I'm talking about no sense of financial responsibility. That night set the tone for years to come. Despite his objections, I chose Lakeland, working multiple jobs to help cover the tuition that my partial scholarships didn't. Every holiday, every family gathering, every phone call included some reference to my expensive mistake and how much better off I would have been at Northwestern. What my father never acknowledged was that I thrived at Lakeland. I graduated, summa cum laude with a double major in business analytics and finance. I secured a competitive internship at Horizon Technologies during my junior year, which led to a full-time job offer before I even graduated. The expensive mistake had positioned me perfectly for a career that combined my analytical skills with my passion for technology, but the narrative never changed. In my father's eyes, I remained financially irresponsible, making poor choices and failing to live up to my potential. The second pivotal moment came 7 years ago when my mother was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. The diagnosis was devastating for our family, not just emotionally, but financially. My father's company had been downsizing, and while he kept his job, his hours were cut, reducing his income significantly. My mother had to retire from teaching earlier than planned as her condition progressed. I had been living in my own apartment in downtown Chicago, building my career at Horizon Technologies, and saving diligently. When I heard about Mom's diagnosis, I immediately offered financial help. Let me contribute to the medical bills, I said during a family meeting shortly after her diagnosis. I'm in a good position at work, and I've been saving. My father's response was swift and dismissive. We don't need handouts from someone who can barely manage their own finances. We'll figure it out ourselves, like we always have. His pride was a wall I couldn't scale, but my concern for my mother was greater than my need for his approval. So, I found another way. I approached my mother privately when my father was at work. Mom, I want to help, but Dad won't let me. Would you be willing to let me pay some of the bills directly? He doesn't need to know. She hesitated, torn between her husband's pride and the practical reality of their situation. I don't like keeping secrets from your father, Alex. It's not a secret, I reasoned. It's just delayed information. Once he sees that I'm financially responsible, that I can help without it being a burden, he'll come around." She agreed reluctantly at first, but with growing relief as I quietly began covering her medical expenses, setting up automatic payments directly to the hospital and pharmacy. 3 years ago, things changed dramatically. My father's company finally closed its doors, and at 58, he found himself unemployed for the first time in his adult life. His severance package was decent, but not enough to maintain their lifestyle and cover my mother's increasing medical needs. Meanwhile, I had been promoted to financial controller at Horizon, nearly doubling my salary. The solution seemed obvious. To me, I would move back home temporarily to help care for Mom and contribute financially, while Dad looked for a new job. But I knew proposing this directly would only result in another rejection. So, I approached it differently. "Dad, I'm thinking of saving for a down payment on a house," I told him. "Would you mind if I moved back home for a while to save on rent? I'd contribute to expenses, of course." He agreed, though, not without pointing out that this was another example of poor planning on my part. What he didn't know was that I already owned a condo in the city, which I was now renting out for additional income. Once I moved back home, I gradually began taking over more bills. First, it was just helping out with the utilities and groceries. Then, when I happened to be at the computer, when a medical bill email came in, I would pay it immediately. I set up automatic transfers to my parents' joint account that appeared as account adjustment on their statements, just enough to cover the mortgage each month. All the while, my father continued to see me as a financial drain. He complained about the extra water and electricity I used, about the food that disappeared from the refrigerator, about how my presence was adding to their financial stress rather than alleviating it. In the evenings, after both my parents had gone to bed, I would sit at the kitchen counter with my laptop, managing not only my own finances, but the entire household's. I created spreadsheets tracking every expense, projected future costs for my mother's care, and adjusted investments to ensure there would always be enough. I researched assistance programs, negotiated with medical providers for discounted rates, and fought with insurance companies over denied claims. All of this invisible work happened in the quiet hours while my father slept. I'm aware that his financially irresponsible son was actually keeping the family afloat. Meanwhile, at work, I continued to advance. My colleagues respected me for my financial acumen. My bosses trusted me with increasingly important responsibilities. Clients sought my advice on complex financial matters. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was responsible for multi-million-dollar budgets at work while being treated like a financial liability at home. For 3 years, I maintained this dual existence. At Horizon, I was Alex Reed, the competent financial controller whose analytical skills and strategic thinking were highly valued. At home, I was just Alex, the disappointing son who couldn't seem to get his financial act together. The emotional toll of this contradiction was immense. There were moments when I nearly broke, when I wanted to shout the truth across the dinner table as my father lectured me about responsibility. There were nights when I sat in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by financial documents, and questioned why I continued this charade. But then I would see my mother, how the treatments I was secretly funding were helping to slow the progression of her disease. I would notice how the worry lines on my father's face would momentarily ease when a bill he had been dreading mysteriously showed a zero balance. And I would decide, once again, that my pride was less important than their well-being. Lily knew some of what I was doing. As a nurse, she understood the costs of our mother's care better than most. And she recognized that our parents' financial situation didn't align with the level of treatment Mom was receiving. "You're paying for all of this, aren't you?" asked me one evening when we were alone, gesturing to the new mobility aids and medication delivery system that had recently appeared in the house. I nodded, swearing her to secrecy. "He should know, Alex," she said. "It's not fair to you, and honestly, it's not fair to him either. He's living in a financial reality that doesn't exist. He's not ready to know," I insisted. "His pride is already wounded from losing his job. Finding out that his supposedly irresponsible son has been supporting the family would crush him." Lily disagreed but respected my decision. She did, however, become my ally. occasionally deflecting our father's criticisms or creating diversions when conversations about money became too pointed. The breaking point, the moment that led to our kitchen counter confrontation, came after a particularly difficult week. My mother had experienced a severe flare-up of her symptoms, requiring additional treatments and specialized care. I had taken time off work to coordinate with doctors and insurance, making calls during my lunch breaks, and staying up late to research treatment options. Meanwhile, my father had received a rejection letter from yet another job application. His frustration and sense of helplessness had reached a boiling point. And as often happens in families, those negative emotions were directed at the safest target, me. That morning, as I prepared for work, he sat at the kitchen counter reviewing what he believed were unpaid bills. His face was drawn with worry, his shoulders hunched with the weight of financial stress he thought he carried alone. "We need to talk about your contribution to this household," he began, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Your mother's new treatments are going to cost us thousands that we don't have." I poured myself a cup of coffee, already knowing that the treatments were covered. I had spent hours on the phone with the insurance company and had set up a payment plan for the remaining balance. "I know things are tight, Dad," I said carefully. "Can increase what I'm giving you for rent," he scoffed. "Rent? The little you give barely covers the extra utilities you use. Do you have any idea what it costs to run this household? The mortgage? The property taxes? The insurance? Your mother's care?" I knew exactly what it cost down to the penny, because I was paying for most of it. "I'm trying to help, Dad," I said, my patience beginning to fray after years of these one-sided conversations. "Trying isn't good enough anymore, Alex," he snapped. "At your age, I was supporting a family of 4 on my own. I didn't have the luxury of trying. I just did what needed to be done." Something inside me shifted at that moment. Perhaps it was the accumulation of years of unrecognized effort, or maybe it was simply exhaustion from maintaining the charade for so long. Whatever it was, I felt a calm resolve settle over me. "You're right," I said, my voice steady. "It's time I showed you exactly what I've been doing." That's when I reached for my briefcase and pulled out the folder that would change everything between us. As the documents spread across the kitchen counter, 3 years of financial records showing exactly how much I had contributed to the household, my father's expression transformed. The anger and frustration gave way to confusion, then disbelief, then a growing realization that seemed to physically change him before my eyes. "I don't understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "How is this possible?" "Ow. This money come from?" "From my job, Dad," I replied. "The job you've never asked about." "I'm the financial controller at Horizon Technologies. I manage a team of 15 people and oversee a departmental budget of $50 million annually. My base salary last year was $145,000, plus bonuses." He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "But why? Why would you pay all this and not say anything? Why would you let me believe we were struggling? Because you wouldn't have accepted my help otherwise," I said simply. "Your pride wouldn't allow it. And because, in your eyes, I've always been financially irresponsible, no matter what evidence suggested otherwise." He picked up a stack of my mother's medical bills, all marked paid in full. "All of these? You paid all of these?" I nodded. "And the mortgage for the past 3 years, the property taxes, and the insurance premiums?" He shook his head slowly, as if trying to reconcile this new information with the narrative he had constructed about me over decades. "But why keep it is secret? Why let me believe? Why let me treat you like a burden?" I finished for him. "Because that's how you've seen me since I was 18 and chose Lakeland over Northwestern. That's the story you decided was true, and nothing I did or said could change it." A heavy silence fell between us, filled with the weight of unspoken words and years of misunderstanding. My father looked down at the documents again, then back at me, his eyes searching my face as if looking for the son he thought he knew. "I had no idea," he finally said. "All this time, I thought." "I know what you thought, Dad," I said, not unkindly. "You thought I was the same irresponsible teenager who made decisions you didn't agree with. You never saw that. Those decisions led me to exactly where I needed to be. He pushed back from the counter, standing up abruptly. For a moment I thought he might walk away, retreat from this uncomfortable truth, as he had retreated from so many difficult conversations in the past. Instead, he did something that shocked me more than anger would have. He began to cry. In 32 years, I had rarely seen my father display raw emotion. He was a man of the old school, believing that vulnerability was weakness, and that a man's worth was measured by his ability to provide for his family. Seeing him now, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, was like witnessing a mountain crumble. "I failed you," he said through tears. "I've been so caught up in my own pride and what I thought was right that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. I couldn't see you." I didn't rush to comfort him or to dismiss his realization. This moment of clarity had been hard won, and I knew that easy absolution would diminish its importance. I said simply, "You failed to see me? But I'm still." "Here, Dad. I've always been here." He nodded, wiping roughly at his eyes with the back of his hand. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you do all this for us, for me, when I've been so—" "Because that's what family does," I replied. "We take care of each other even when it's hard, even when it's not acknowledged or appreciated." My father looked at me with new eyes, eyes that finally saw not the child I had been, but the man I had become. In that moment, standing in our kitchen surrounded by the evidence of years of silent support, something fundamental shifted between us. The old narrative began to crumble, making space for a new understanding to take its place. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You don't have to say anything right now," I told him. "Just see me, Dad. Really see me. That's all I've ever wanted." The story doesn't end at the kitchen counter. In many ways, that confrontation was just the beginning. The first honest conversation in what would become a slow, sometimes painful, but ultimately healing journey toward rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of truth rather than assumption. In the days following our kitchen counter confrontation, the atmosphere in our home changed in ways both subtle and profound. The air felt lighter somehow, as if the truth had physically altered the space we shared. My father moved through the house differently, more hesitant, more aware, his eyes often finding me across rooms with a look of bewildered reassessment, as if he were meeting me for the first time. We didn't immediately dive into deep conversations about the past. There was an unspoken agreement that we both needed time to adjust to this new reality, him to the knowledge that his financially irresponsible son had been the family's silent supporter, and me to the strange experience of finally being seen clearly after years in the shadows. The first meaningful conversation came 3 days after the confrontation. I was sitting on the back porch, laptop open, reviewing quarterly projections for work when my father stepped outside, 2 mugs of coffee in his hands. He placed one beside me without a word and took the seat across from mine. "Your mother doesn't know, does she?" asked after a long silence. I shook my head. "Not everything. She knows I've been helping with her medical expenses, but not about the mortgage or the rest. I asked her not to tell you about the medical bills." He nodded slowly, turning his mug in his hands. "She kept that secret for you."
Oh, what?
It wasn't a question, but I could hear the hurt beneath his words. Not just that I had kept this from him, but that his wife had participated in the deception. "She did it because she knew how much your pride matters to you," I explained. "She was protecting you in her way." He looked up sharply. "Protecting me from what?" "From knowing that my son was more capable than I gave him credit for. From facing the fact that I couldn't support my family on my own anymore. From feeling like you had failed," I said quietly. "That's always been your greatest fear, hasn't it? Failing as a provider, as a father." His eyes widened slightly, surprised by my insight, then his shoulders slumped. "When did you get so perceptive?" "I've had a lot of practice watching people, trying to understand what motivates them," I replied. "It's part of what makes me good at my job." "Your job," he repeated, a hint of bitterness in his voice. "The job I never bothered to understand. Because I was too busy clinging to my outdated ideas about what success should look like." I closed my laptop, giving him my full attention. "It wasn't just about your outdated ideas, Dad. It was about your fear. Fear that the world had changed in ways you couldn't control. that the rules you played by your whole life don't apply anymore. He was silent for a long moment, considering my words. When did you become so wise? He finally asked, his voice softer than I was accustomed to hearing. Probably around the same time I became financially responsible, I said with a small smile. You just weren't looking. The ghost of a smile crossed his face, then faded. I've missed so much, haven't I? By holding on to this image of you that stopped being accurate years ago, if it ever was accurate at all. That conversation marked the beginning of a gradual thawing between us. It wasn't dramatic or instantaneous. Decades of misunderstanding don't dissolve overnight, but it was a start, foundation we could build on. The next significant shift came when my father asked to see where I worked. It was a simple request, made casually over dinner one evening, but I recognized it for what it was, an attempt to enter the part of my life he had previously dismissed. I thought maybe I could pick you up from the office sometime, he suggested, trying to sound nonchalant. If you don't mind showing your old man around? I agreed, and the following Friday, he arrived at Horizon Technologies' gleaming downtown office building. I met him in the lobby, feeling a strange mixture of pride and nervousness as I signed him in as a visitor and led him through security. His eyes widened as we entered the sleek, modern workspace with its open floor plan, collaborative areas, and panoramic views of Chicago's skyline. Several colleagues greeted me as we walked through, and I introduced my father, watching his expression change with each interaction. Alex, do you have the Davidson portfolio analysis? Asked Maya, our VP of Operations, stopping us in the corridor. The client meeting got moved up to Monday. Already sent it to your inbox, I replied. I included some additional projections based on the market shift we discussed. She smiled. Always one step ahead. This is why we can't function without you. She turned to my father. Your son is the best thing that's happened to this company's financial department in years. We tried to poach him from 3 different competitors before he finally agreed to join us. My father's expression was a complex blend of surprise and pride. Is that right? He managed. Absolutely. Consider yourself lucky. Some of us only get to see Alex during work hours. You get him at home too. After she walked away, my father turned to me. They tried to poach you from other companies. I nodded, leading him toward my office. I had a few offers after college. Horizon made the most sense for what I wanted to do. When we reached my office, a corner space with my name on the door and a view of Lake Michigan, his disbelief was palpable. He slowly took in the awards on the wall, the family photo on my desk, the only personal item I displayed at work, and the whiteboard covered in financial projections and strategy notes. This is yours? He asked, gesturing to the space. For the past 2 years, I confirmed, since the promotion to controller. He walked to the window, looking out at the view, then turned back to face me. I had no idea, he said, his voice thick with emotion. All this time I thought, he trailed off, shaking his head. And she thought I was barely getting by? Finished for him. I was living paycheck to paycheck in some entry-level position. I never asked, he admitted. Not once in all these years did I actually ask you about your career, your achievements, your life. No, I agreed. You didn't. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of that simple truth hanging between us. I'm sorry, Alex, he said finally. I've been so wrong about you for so long. It was the first direct apology he had offered, and I felt something shift inside me, a knot of resentment beginning, ever so slightly, to loosen. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It means a lot to hear it. On the drive home, he asked questions about my work, real questions that showed genuine interest rather than judgment. How had I gotten into financial analytics? What did I enjoy about my role? What challenges did I face? It was the conversation we should have been having for years. But I welcomed it now, sharing details about my professional life that I had previously kept to myself. The next phase of our reconciliation involved my mother. I'd been avoiding a full disclosure of our financial arrangement, unsure how to approach the subject without making her feel caught between her husband and son. But my father surprised me by bringing it up himself over dinner one evening. Elena, he said, setting down his fork. There's something you should know. Something Alex and I have been discussing. My mother looked between us, her eyes wary. Though her MS had weakened her physically, her mind remained sharp, and she had sensed the shift in our dynamic over the past weeks. "What is it?" she asked. "I know about the bills," my father said gently. "All of them. Not just the medical expenses you thought I didn't know about, but everything else too. The mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, everything Alex has been quietly handling for us." Her eyes widened, then filled with tears. "Thomas, I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I just couldn't bear to see you worry anymore." And Alex insisted he could help, and you have nothing to apologize for, he interrupted, reaching for her hand. "Nothing at all. I'm the one who should be sorry for being so blinded by pride that I created a situation where my own wife and son felt they needed to deceive me." She looked at me, questions in her eyes. "You told him everything?" I nodded. "It was time, Mom. We couldn't keep living with these secrets between us." She squeezed my hand, then my father's. "I never wanted to lie to you, Thomas. But you wouldn't accept help, and we needed it." "I know," he acknowledged. I was too proud to admit that the world had changed, that I couldn't do it all on my own anymore. But I'm trying to change that now. That evening marked a new beginning. For our family, one built on honesty rather than protective deception. My mother's relief was visible, the burden of secrecy finally lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in years, we talked openly about our finances, our concerns, our hopes for the future. My father's journey toward acceptance wasn't linear. There were days when old patterns reasserted themselves, moments when his pride would flare up, when the admission that his son had become the family provider felt too painful to acknowledge. But these reactions became less frequent, less intense, as he gradually adjusted to our new reality. One significant breakthrough came when he asked to see my financial records, not out of suspicion, but out of a genuine desire to understand. "Would you show me how you've been managing everything?" he asked one evening. "I've been doing our books the same way for 30 years. Maybe it's time I learned some new approaches." I brought out my laptop and opened the comprehensive spreadsheets I had created to track the household finances. I showed him how I had categorized expenses, projected future costs, and created contingency funds for unexpected emergencies. I explained the research I had done on medical coverage, the negotiations with providers, the strategies I had implemented to maximize benefits while minimizing out-of-pocket costs. His amazement grew as I walked him through each system. "Did all this yourself?" he asked. "Where did you learn these techniques?" "Some of it from school, some from work, and a lot from necessity," I explained. "When Mom got sick, I knew we needed a better system than the checkbook balancing you'd been doing." He nodded slowly. "Your way is better," he admitted. "More thorough, more forward-thinking, coming from my father. A man who had prided himself on his financial management for decades, this was a profound concession. We could manage it together from now on," I suggested. "Two heads are better than one." He looked up, surprise and hope mingling in his expression. "You'd want that? To work on this with me?" "I would," I confirmed. "There's still a lot I could learn from your experience." It was an olive branch, an acknowledgement that while his methods might be outdated in some ways, his wisdom still had value. The relief and gratitude in his eyes told me it was exactly what he needed. Not just to be helped, but to feel useful, to feel that he still had something to contribute. From that point forward, Sunday evenings became our financial planning time. We would sit at the kitchen table, reviewing the week's expenses and discussing upcoming bills. Sometimes these sessions would evolve into broader conversations about life, choices, and the changing economic landscape that had created such different career paths for our generations. When I started at the factory, a man could work there his whole life and retire comfortably. He reflected during one such conversation that security is gone now. "It is," I agreed. "But there are new opportunities too, different paths to security." "Like your path," he acknowledged. I didn't understand it because it was so different from what I knew. "I was afraid for you, afraid you were making choices that would leave you vulnerable." Fear is a powerful motivator, I observed. It can make us hold too tightly to what we know, even when it's no longer working. He nodded thoughtfully. Fear and pride, dangerous combination. These conversations didn't erase the past, but they built bridges of understanding that allowed us to move forward together. My father began to see me not as the disappointing son who had rejected his path, but as an adult who had forged a successful way forward in a world very different from the one he had navigated. The most profound change, however, wasn't in how my father saw me, but in how he saw himself. As he gradually released the identity of sole provider, a role that had defined him for decades, he began to discover new aspects of himself, new ways to contribute to our family beyond the financial. He started spending more time with my mother, not just as her caretaker, but as her companion. They played board games, watched old movies, worked on puzzles together, simple activities that brought joy back into their relationship. He began cooking, discovering a talent and passion for it that had gone unexplored during his working years. He joined a support group for spouses of MS patients, forming friendships with people who understood his challenges. 6 months after our kitchen counter confrontation, I came home from work to find my father at the dining room table, surrounded by papers and his old laptop. "What are you working on?" I asked, setting down my briefcase. He looked up, a mixture of nervousness and excitement on his face. "I've been thinking about what you said about new opportunities and different paths. I've been doing some research." He turned his laptop toward me. On the screen was information about a certification program for financial counseling, specifically focused on helping families navigate medical crises. "I've seen firsthand how complicated it is to manage healthcare costs," he explained. "All those hours you spend on the phone with insurance companies, researching treatments, negotiating with providers. There are families going through that who don't have someone like you to help them." I sat down across from him, surprised and intrigued. "You're thinking about becoming a financial counselor?" He nodded. "Part-time to start. The program takes 6 months to complete, and I'd need to learn a lot about the current systems, but I think I could be good at it. I understand what these families are going through, and I've learned so much from watching how you've handled our situation." The humility in his voice, the willingness to learn something new at his age, the desire to help others facing similar challenges, it was a transformation I couldn't have imagined 6 months earlier. "I think that's an incredible idea," I told him honestly. "Your experience would be invaluable to families in crisis." "You do?" His face lit up with relief and excitement. "I was worried you might think it was foolish, a man my age starting something new." "Not foolish at all," I assured him. "Brave, actually. It's not easy to reinvent yourself, to adapt to change instead of resisting it." "I had a good teacher," he said quietly, looking at me with newfound respect. That evening marked yet another shift in our relationship from father and son to something closer to equals, each with wisdom to offer the other. The financial burden I had carried in secret was now a shared responsibility, openly acknowledged and managed together. The emotional burden of misunderstanding and disappointment was gradually lightening as we built a new relationship based on who we truly were, not who we had assumed each other to be. My sister Lily, watching this transformation from the sidelines, commented on it during one of our regular coffee meets. "I never thought I'd see the day," she said, stirring her latte. "Dad asking you for advice, actually listening to your perspective. It's like witnessing a miracle. It hasn't been easy," I admitted. "There are still moments when he falls back into old patterns, when the pride and the fear resurface." "Of course there are," she agreed. "You're undoing decades of thinking, decades of identity formation. That doesn't happen overnight. But the fact that it's happening at all is remarkable." She was right. The journey wasn't complete, and perhaps it never would be entirely. There would always be moments of tension, old wounds that could be inadvertently reopened, assumptions that needed to be challenged. But we were moving forward, learning a new way of being family that allowed for growth, change, and mutual respect. 1 year after the kitchen counter confrontation, we gathered for a small celebration, the completion of my father's certification program. He had worked diligently, studying late into the night, asking questions without shame when he didn't understand something, persisting through frustrations with technology and the challenges of being an older student. My mother had insisted on marking the occasion with a special dinner. She was having a good day, her symptoms manageable enough that she could help with some of the cooking. The kitchen was filled with delicious aromas and the sound of laughter, a stark contrast to the tense, accusatory atmosphere that had dominated our home for so long. As we sat down to eat, my father looked around the table at his family, his wife, his daughter, and the son he had finally come to see clearly. "I want to thank you all," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for your patience, your forgiveness, and your willingness to teach an old dog new tricks." He turned to me. "Especially you, Alex. You had every right to be angry, to walk away after how I treated you. Instead, you stayed. You supported us, not just financially, but emotionally. You showed me what real strength looks like." I felt a lump form in my throat. "That's what family does," I said, echoing the words I had spoken a year earlier at the kitchen counter. "We take care of each other even when it's hard." "Yes," he agreed. "But I've learned it goes beyond that. Taking care of each other isn't just about paying bills or providing material support. It's about seeing each other clearly, respecting each other's paths even when they're different from what we expected, and being willing to change when our old ways of thinking no longer serve us." He raised his glass. "Two new beginnings, two second chances, and to the wisdom to recognize when it's time to let go of who we thought we were supposed to be in order to become who we truly are." As we clinked glasses, I reflected on the journey we had taken. The confrontation at the kitchen counter hadn't just been about bills or money or financial responsibility. It had been about truth, about visibility, about the courage to shatter illusions that no longer served us. My father had needed to let go of his narrow definition of success, of his belief that there was only one right path, one right way to be a provider, a father, a man. I had needed to step out of the shadows, to stop enabling a narrative that diminished me, to claim my worth, and demand recognition for my contributions. The bills I had handed him that day were more than just paper. They were evidence of a reality he had refused to see, a catalyst for a transformation that had ultimately freed us both. Him from the prison of pride and outdated expectations, me from the burden of invisible support and unacknowledged worth. As I looked at my father across the table, his face more relaxed than I had seen it in years, his eyes clear and present, I realized that true financial responsibility wasn't just about paying bills on time or making sound investments. It was about honesty, transparency, and the courage to face reality, however uncomfortable it might be. The greatest burden I had carried wasn't the mortgage payments or medical bills. It was the weight of being unseen, unrecognized, misunderstood by the person whose approval I had sought my entire life. In freeing myself from that burden, I had also unexpectedly freed my father from his own, the exhausting effort of maintaining a facade of control in a world that had changed beyond his understanding. Sometimes I realized the most responsible thing we can do is to tell the truth, even when it hurts, even when it disrupts the stories we've told ourselves about who we are. Because only in that disruption can we find the space to become something new, something more authentic, something free. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.